Hey, everybody, welcome back to a new episode. Today, I'm talking to one of the world's best email copywriters and one of the best teachers of email copywriting in the world, Mr. Chris Orzechowski. But before we get into that interview, I have one announcement I need to make. So, this is going to be the last episode of Getting Out of the Machine. That's not because I'm giving up on the podcast, it's because I'm renaming it. So, starting next week, the podcast is going to be called Practical Liberty. So next week, you'll see a new logo, a new name in your podcast or YouTube feed. Don't worry, that's still me. Now, next week's episode is going to explain in a lot of detail my new plan for the podcast. And I think it's going to make this a lot more valuable for a lot more people. But now for the last episode of Getting Out of the Machine with the incomparable Chris Orzechowski. Hey, everybody, welcome back. This is going to be an exciting episode because we're going to be talking about email copywriting. A lot of you have been really interested in email copywriting. So I happen to be connected to one of the top email copywriting experts, and that is Chris Orzechowski. Chris, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks so much for having me, Henry. Happy to be here.
So can you give folks a little bit about your background? Because the way I understand it, you went from being a high school teacher to now having this whole big email, like kind of empire business. So can you kind of give people that story?
Yeah, so I actually started off as an elementary school teacher. Like I graduated college, didn't know what I wanted to do because I wrestled in college, and I was like, I didn't really want to do anything, to be honest with you. I said, how do I find a job where I can get paid a lot and do nothing? Then once I got over my naivete, I was like, okay, I got to do something, right? So I was like, I'll just teach, I'll coach wrestling, I'll have my summers off, like whatever, I'll just do that. And then I got my master's degree, did 6 years of college, whatever. Started teaching, got home like the first day. I said, I made a huge mistake. This is not what I want to do. But now I'm like stuck. I'm in a job. I just went to college for 6 years. Like, what the hell am I going to do? So I knew that people made money online. I knew that was like a thing. This is back in like 2013, right? I had this mentor, this guy, Zach Avanesh. He was a strength coach, and he was the guy I worked with throughout high school and college, and I ended up coaching under him. But he had his brick and mortar business, and he also had this like digital product business, and he would sell like ebooks and certifications and like coaching. And like, I was like, damn, like this dude just like makes money on the internet. I was like, this is crazy. So I remember I would read his articles. I thought they were articles. They were sales letters, but I was like, I'd read his articles, right? And I'd be like, there's something happening in my brain. Like, what's going on in my brain as I'm reading this, right? It was like hypnotizing almost. And years later, I found that was copywriting, right? But I said, I'm going to figure this out because people do this. And if other people do it, why can't I do it? Right. So it's going to take some learning. So I started doing research. I tumbled down the rabbit hole. I started a few websites in the strength conditioning world, didn't really do much. And then I started this site called Wrestling Coach Academy, where I was just interviewing wrestling coaches. I had a podcast. I was doing daily emails. I was selling affiliate products. And this is before I had ever even taken a copywriting course. Like I built the website. I was doing all this stuff, graphic design, all this stuff, right? But I wasn't really making a lot of money, partially because like most people who like wrestling, like they're not spending $1,000 on an info course. Like they live in Nebraska and they make $38,000 a year and they drive a 20-year-old pickup. Like they're not spending money on like digital courses and coaching. Like this is not the market, right? Yeah. So I said, what do I like about all this? And I learned that copywriting was this thing where you put words in a Google document and you hand it to someone to give you thousands of dollars in return. And I said, wow, like I know every word out there, right? I bet if I assembled them in the right direction, we could make some money doing this. Like, I know it's not like I'm learning a new language. I know all the words already. I just need to learn how to put them together in the right order, right? And then you do that and people give you money for that. So I was like, this is crazy. So I tumbled down that rabbit hole, started trying to get clients. I got my first paying client back in 2015. I got paid like $300 to do a bunch of emails, a website, a product description, a product insert for an Amazon product. It was like a 3-week project, but like that changed my life. I got that $300 and I was like, my life was never the same after that. I said, I could do this. This is real. It's tangible. I could make a living doing this if I just learn how to scale it up.
So how long did it take you? Well, first of all, I love that we kind of had the same, a lot of the copywriting coaches and people out there are like, oh, you got to pick a niche from the beginning. You have to do just email autoresponders for, natural health people. And both you and I kind of started with like, I'm going to do everything. I don't know what I want to specialize in. I'm just going to go out there and do it all. And then kind of, we found out what we were the best at, I think, and kind of niched down from there. So how did you kind of end up in the email world as opposed to, I ended up mostly in long form sales letters. I made a bunch of money through email, but mostly, just to push people to my sales letters. So how did you get to just specializing in email specifically?
So it was definitely a lot of I always go back to the Dr. Seuss thing. Like you got to find out where it's not. Like you got to find out what your thing is not, right? So like I tried everything, video scripts, long form sales letters, VSLs, did all that stuff. And then eventually I was like, you know what, like the email stuff for me, like mentally at the end of the school day, like coming home, just sitting down to write an email seemed a lot less daunting than writing a long form sales letter or VSL that might take 2, 4, 5 weeks, whatever it might, or
Yeah.
even longer sometimes, like if it's a big promo, right? Um, but an email, I could bang out 1 or 2 or 3 emails in an evening and feel like I accomplished something, get it done. And then when I started looking at the unit economics of an email, I said, okay, even if I only get paid $100 for an email, which actually isn't a bad, even today, it's not a bad rate, like for most people. But like back then, I said, even if I just make $100 and I write 3 emails in an evening, I made just as much working for 2, 3, 4 hours, whatever it was, that I did in my day job. Right? I made
Yeah.
$300 a day pre-tax, and then $300 in the evening pre-tax. Right? So I said, okay, I've doubled or tripled my effective hourly rate. And I said, all I need to do is just keep doing that. I don't have to worry about, I wanted to do financial. Not a lot of people know this, but like that's what I want to do because that's where the best people were. And I still actually might want to do it at some point. I know like that'll be a challenge. That'll be a mountain I want to climb at some point in my career. But I was like, oh, that's where the best people go. But it seemed like really hard. I'll be honest, like it seemed like I didn't know if I had the sauce. I was like, at the time, I was like, let me just master this one thing, this short form thing that's simple. And it didn't seem like there was a lot of people, like there were people teaching and talking about it. There were a few people who had courses and things like that, but like it didn't seem like a big thing. um so I said, I really like this. I really enjoy it. It's fun. It's simple. It's short. And I can't mess up a 300-word email, but I can mess up a 30,000-word sales letter.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of that.
I mean, a 30,000 word sales letter, what is that, like 3 hours long? Most,
Yeah, like, or whatever it is, 10,000 words, whatever.
I've only written
So
one that was I think it was 25,000 words, but it was a quiz funnel. So it was actually like 7 different sales letters. And that one took me
okay.
6 months. That was brutal.
Yeah, I
But
was like, I might mess that up. I don't want to risk that.
yeah, so I think one of the things that attracts a lot of people to the email copywriting world is that is exactly what you said. You can sit down at the end of the day and you're doing start to finish. You have a project done. You have a finished product that you can turn in. Whereas, like you said, it takes me, a month to 3 to 5, 6 months to do a full financial, especially, or health even sales letter. So, I mean, is there a standard length for email? I mean, the answer is no, honestly, because I've seen emails that, were 3 sentences long that were some of the best performing emails I've ever seen. And then, most of my emails tend to be, 500 to 1,000 words. So how do you kind of think about the different types of emails that are out there?
So this is where I get really nerdy with this stuff because I
Do it.
think it's very context dependent based on what type of sequence you're running, what the parameters of the sequence are. If we're talking about a launch sequence, all those emails are going to have different lengths, right? Like the email you send to the PM 1 hour before the deadline might be the 3 sentence emails. And I've had that before where that's the email, the 3 sentence email an hour before the deadline does more sales than any other email in the entire launch. If it's email number 2 in the pre-launch, maybe it's a long form story, right? If it's, the email on day 2 of the cart open in the AM, it might be an objection handling email that comes in at about 400 to 500 words, right? So I always think context dependent for every single project. Whether it's an autoresponder, whether it's a broadcast, whether it's a launch, and I always kind of classify in those 3 buckets. So like we could take them one by one. For broadcast, it's kind of depends. It's an ebb and a flow. Every single list is going to respond and behave differently, and the more you write and get into the rhythm with that list, you're going to start to. It's kind of like I'm a big fan of that show Yellowstone, and there's the one scene when Walker talks about, or Rip talks about, that horse can feel a tiny little fly land on its butt and flicker with its tail. And I'm like, you need to feel that with your list. Like if you email enough, you start to say, if I say this, people are going to go crazy. I'm going to get a bunch of replies. I'm going to get a bunch of clicks. I'm going to get a bunch of opens. Like this is a topic my people care about. And you could start to tailor your email length based on their responsiveness. Some audiences respond to shorter stuff. Some audiences like long rambling stuff. So it's always one of those it's depend answers that I hate to give, but I have to. But
But
the cool
wait,
thing is,
just real quick, can you define broadcast? Because a lot of people listening are not going to know any of the terminology. They're
okay,
just getting into the copywriting world. And
yeah.
so
So A
Yeah.
broadcast is like one of those emails where, like, someone just dashes off an email and they send it that day, and it's not an automated message, and it's not a deadline driven message where it's like, hey, we have this, we're launching this new product, and we only have 100 units. Like, that's kind of like a launch email. An autoresponder is like you sign up for a list and you get those drip of emails, and then a broadcast is just like, hey, here's an update of what's going on in the business or behind the scenes or about something we have coming down the pipe, and or a new piece of content we release. So it's one of those kind of like a one-off email, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. Uh, so yeah, I cut you off, but
Oh yeah, no worries. What I like to think for the autoresponders in terms of length, I like to look at good performing broadcasts and say how much of that can be repurposed into an autoresponder. Because if you have hundreds of emails that have done well over the years, you could just cherry pick the ones that have done the best and arrange. You might have to fill in some gaps, add some stories, add some different types of email hooks in there to kind of create a little bit of buffer. But for the most part, your autoresponder is already written. So in terms of length, I mean, I think most people are probably safe. There is like there's kind of like a feeling you get like when you read an email. Sometimes you're like, okay, this email just keeps going on and not like you need to wrap it up. Like there's kind of that rhythm that you feel. But I think if you come in anywhere between 250 and like 600 words, that's probably a good range for most emails. Is a good like catch-all rule.
yeah, I feel like an email should be as short as it possibly can be without leaving out anything that you need to say. So, I mean, it could be as short as it needs to be without being boring. So, I mean, Pete, that's the problem when people go too long is that usually they're just getting off topic. I mean, this is in every type of copywriting, right? Is like, sure, I could write, 10,000 words on this, but the actual core of what I need to communicate is 3,000 words or 4,000 words. I think cutting copy is one of the hardest skills for people to learn as they get into it because we have this, as you're hearing me do now, we have this tendency to just ramble and want to get every thought in our head out. But one of the things I want to talk about, who are the actual clients for like email copywriters? Because like I know who's putting out long form sales letters, but literally every business in the world right now uses email. I mean, if they're online at all, they hopefully use email. So, but they don't all hire copywriters, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when you're thinking about becoming an email copywriter, uh, what kind of clients are you kind of targeting in the beginning, and how much do you need to learn, I guess, for each different client? Like, where would you start somebody saying, all right, you're a decent writer, you're just learning copywriting, like these are the clients you should start off with, these are your starter clients?
Um, I think there's probably a hierarchy here that we could. I don't think I've ever put this publicly, but like the way that I think about it is like the hierarchy is digital product people are probably at the top, and I'm talking specifically about long form stuff. I'm oh sorry. Okay, let me back up. So when I say like long form email copy, that means emails that aren't a pretty poster style. Hey, here's a water bottle. Here's a coupon. Like, those things you see in e-commerce. And I'll get to e-commerce in a second. But I think digital product people need good direct response email copy because their products are by nature intangible. So how do you make them tangible? You explain, you educate, you tell stories, you shift beliefs, you overcome objection, you do all of those things because they can't hold the course in their hands, right? Or they can't hold the ebook or whatever it is in their hands, or the newsletter or whatever it is, right? So that is where most of the opportunity is probably going to be. I'd say a tie for second and third would be e-commerce and SaaS, software as a service, right? E-commerce is physical products. And yes, you'll see a lot of those pretty poster, heavily designed emails. But like at my agency, that's all we do is we do plain text. And we tell people from the start, like, hey, we do plain text emails. So if you don't want that, like we're going to introduce you to someone else. And we outperform a lot of people because it can work. Like if you have good products and a good list, like you're going to sell. But when you have the good copy and you layer that on top, that's when things go absolutely bonkers, right? And I would put them on the same footing as SaaS because SaaS and e-commerce are products or business types that are very behaviorally dependent on the behavior of the person interacting with the website, right? Because an e-commerce store and a SaaS aren't necessarily like they're different. One's a physical product, one is quote unquote a digital product, right? But the way that the email marketing tends to work is a lot of it's triggered on it's a machine, it's an algorithm, right? Like an e-commerce store is an algorithm. It's like you put $1 of advertising in, the person goes to the site, what do they hit, what percentage of people are buying these kind of products, and then what happens with the life cycle afterwards. Same kind of thing with SaaS. You sign up for a trial, you either take the trial or you don't take the trial, you sign up, maybe you cancel, maybe you stay. What happens if you stay for a year? What happens if you cancel after a month, right? What happens if you want to move to a higher tier or a lower tier? There's all these different situational things. So being that there's so many situational triggers that are happening in both of those customer life cycle journeys that you tend to see more with e-commerce and SaaS, those are probably the second most popular opportunities. And those businesses tend to get big. Like digital product businesses can get big. Financial alternative health, obviously they can get huge. But outside of that, you don't see like a couple years ago, what a Brendan Burchard did like 40 million, right? Like, I don't know. I think Brooke Castillo did 40 or 50 million. Like, so you'll see some big business. Tony Robbins obviously is big, but you're not going to see a lot of like $1 billion digital I mean, Grant Cardone will probably eventually be there, right? But there's not a ton of them. Whereas e-commerce businesses can be $1 billion businesses, or SaaS business can be multi-billion-dollar businesses. So I'd say there's maybe a little bit slightly less demand, but there's much more scalability, and there's so many more of those businesses. So there's a ton of opportunity there. And then below that, I would say there's service businesses, which are high value and high margin, so that they can afford an email copywriter, and they can bring someone in to essentially sell 5, 10, 15, $25,000 services, whatever it is. And you could even maybe lump in like local brick and mortar there as well, but they don't usually hire copywriters. They might hire people to help with digital marketing, and copywriting might be under the umbrella of that.
So where would you would kind of start at the bottom of that hierarchy?
I
Like
would start at the top. I would go at the top. I would say, can you get with people who are selling digital products? Because they definitely 100% need email copy, right? Like an e-commerce or a SaaS brand, like they might have a good enough product and luck themselves into getting decent enough sales without email. But like digital product brands, like you're probably not going to succeed if you don't have email. You know what I mean? So it's like the
yeah.
need.
Yeah, so when I was starting out in copywriting, still trying to kind of find my niche, I considered email for a little bit as just kind of, I'll focus here. But at the time, I did some math in my head, and I was like, all right, what do I need to make this a six-figure business? And I was like, all right, I'm getting $100 to $150 in email. I need to write like 6 a week, and I get to work 50 weeks at least. And I was doing the math, and it just didn't quite make sense in my head. Like, whereas I could get, not at the time, but eventually I knew I could get 20, 30, $50,000 for a sales letter. But I wasn't really looking at the whole picture. Like, would you say, so when you're starting out, you're basically writing emails with somebody else's strategy. But when you start climbing up the hierarchy, you're like the income hierarchy, you're more doing strategy than just the email. Is that, how would you like look at that?
Yeah, because you become a problem solver at a certain point, right? Or at least that's what that's what I try to help my people with, is like not just being an order taker, but being, I call it like moving from the kids table to the adults table, where like clients who come to me, they have problems. They don't say I need 7 emails. They say I have this problem. How do we solve this problem? I say, okay, well, let's take a look. Let's take a look under the hood, right? Okay, you don't have this. You don't have this. This is all messed up. We got to fix this. We got to fix that. Once you do these things, your problem will be solved, right? It'll be X amount of dollars. So I focus on charging value-based pricing, solving for that problem, because I know if we solve that problem, how much it's going to be worth to the client, right? There's some problems you solve for a client might be worth hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, right? So you then elevate yourself out of the charging per email rate. So that's like one thing. Like, how do from an effective hourly rate standpoint, you could still do the same 6 emails a week or whatever it is, but now you're charging 4 or 5 times as much. My agency, we charge between $600 and $1,000 an email. I mean, we work with very high-end clients, right, who can afford that, but they get a massive ROI from that, right? Because they're large-scale digital product people or e-commerce people. But yeah, it's doing the strategy, and that's one way. The other way too with emails, like I always call it like the Trojan horse, right? Because once you start doing their emails and you're that steady fixture in their rotation of contractors, right, and you're doing all that stuff for them on a monthly basis or whatever it is, I just organically, this happened. Like clients would be like, oh, if only we can get our Facebook ads working. I say, do you want me to take a look at that? And they say, of course. And then I'd write those, right? Then, oh, we got this video script. I don't want to do it. Hey, do you want me to take that off your hands, right? So if you get in the door with email, you could even keep that email rate. But if you want to get to that 6 figures or beyond, you could just do other projects. Like you could do their long form stuff. You could do their video scripts. You could do their squeeze pages and landing pages and everything else.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's always been amazing about working with clients is you come in with a certain skill set that you position yourself as an expert at, but then once you're in the door, they're like, "What else can you do for me?" And
Yeah.
and you can keep going. Well, for 10,000 more dollars. I mean,
well, it's a magic trick, right? It's like when you see a magician on the street, they do a magic trick. The next thing you say is, "Do you have another trick?" Like, what's the next trick? That's what happens with copy, at least what I see.
So how much do you focus on, like, because you have some email copywriting courses out there and books and stuff, how much do you focus on strategy versus the writing tactics? And I guess, do you see a distinction between the two?
The writing tactics, not to sound like glib, but they almost like bore me now, because you do something for so long, it's just like, okay, yes, mastery, the path to you get 1% better. Like I get that, and people yell at me for saying, but like after a while, I just get bored. I'm like, okay, I've kind of mastered 95% of it. Like, can I get to 96 or 97? Yeah, I could, but like, I talk about that stuff in some of my products, but like the strategy stuff is what really excites me, because that's where like A, the bigger money is made, and two, like it's a lot cooler being that guy or that girl, right? It's a lot cooler being the person, like the go-to person, being the wolf from Pulp Fiction, right? Like you're the person they call when someone needs to clean up the mess. Like you're the person who calls to get them out of the jam. Like that's what I really like, and that's what really excites me. And I think it's more of a that's something I could do. I know because there's always going to be new problems, right? The landscape's going to change. There's going to be different products, different types of clients, certain new businesses forming that need, in different industries that need help. So for me, the strategy stuff is always the most exciting. And I try to more of my stuff now is on the strategy. Like I've documented a lot of the writing stuff and I continue to. I mean, I did my email of the week series. I did 55 email breakdowns on my blog where I just break down, 3,000 word breakdowns when I break down emails and say, here's all the psychological writing tactics that are going on. And that stuff's cool. But for me personally, like I've always been the person where like once I get good enough at something, I'm on to the next thing because I want to go climb another mountain.
Yeah, I think my podcast listener will probably be tired of me talking about the talent stack. But I mean, that's exactly what you just described, right? Is you only have to get to the 80%, which is more competent than most people at a certain skill, and then move on to the next one and just keep adding those. So I guess in that vein, all right, we have writing is obviously a skill you need for it to be an email copywriter. You have the strategy, psychology of how people are interacting with something. Is there anything else you kind of add to that talent stack that you think email copywriters should at least consider getting good at?
I think the tech, some people they're like allergic to it, right? They're like, I don't want to be seen inside the ESP. And like I was like that actually for years. But what I realized is like if you're gonna go to war, you want to know how to use your rifle, right? And the better you understand how to use that rifle, the more effective of a shot you're gonna be. So if you don't know how to use the ESP, you're not going to be good at strategy because you're not going to understand segmentation. You're not even going to understand what options there are from an ESP perspective about things that segments you could create, for instance, right? Different automations and things that you could do. Like things like Active Campaign have things like smart sending where they'll, use data that they have from your customers to send the email to them at a time when they're most likely to open. Like so if you don't do any ESPs, you don't even know what's out there, right? You don't even know what kind of automations you can create. You don't know flow triggers and flow filters and those kind of things. So I think even if you don't want to go in and push buttons, and I don't want to push buttons, right? But even if you don't want to go in and do that, at least knowing how to use that stuff and how the stuff works is going to make you more effective. Like I jumped major levels once I started my own email list because I was in the ESP every single day for myself, figuring stuff out. What does this button do? What's a snippet? What's a rule? What's an automation? What is an automation goal? What are these other, filters and these kind of things? So I think that is one of the things that most people can round themselves out in terms of talent stack. Even if you never use it for a client, you still just hand a client a Google document. You never go in and push the buttons. That's going to help you progress.
Yeah, ESP is email service provider, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just making sure people understand the technology.
Sorry,
or the
I should have clarified that.
Yeah, so I am in the process of switching from Aweber to ConvertKit, and it is like, I didn't really do any of the automation stuff, right? I'm a very ready, fire, aim. Like I wanted to launch an email list, so I signed up for the first thing. I had an Aweber list from years ago that had a couple hundred people on it. So when I started building out a new email list, I was just like, sure, I'll stick with what I know. But yeah, getting inside there and looking around, it can be intimidating. I mean, it's great. I'm working with Rachel Mazza, and she's kind of like helping me. So I'm looking as she's going through it, like we're doing screen share, and she's like, all right, these are the tags. These are this person came from this list. You don't need to create a whole new list, Henry. You just need to tag them and set the automation. So I mean, it's overwhelming at first, but if you take it bite by bite, I think anybody here that can use a computer and if you can use most of the social media sites or like I don't know, Microsoft Excel, you could figure out these things. The technology is not overwhelming. And there's a bajillion, that's a real number, bajillion tutorials and stuff on YouTube. You can go look up how to do this. And of course, the service providers are incentivized to help you use their product, right? They want you to stick around. So the more effective your business is, the longer you stick with them. So I don't know, it's not as hard. I think you just got to dive in and take it step by step with a lot of these processes.
Yeah. Like I've been behind the hood of like my ad accounts and like Facebook Business Manager and Google, and like those are complex. Like an ESP is nowhere near. Like you go into Business Manager and Facebook, like my eyes glaze over. I'm like, I need a chaperone if I'm going to be in here pushing stuff. But the ESP, yeah, like it's like that at first. But if you're just in there every day, like just start clicking around, getting curious. And you're right, those help desks, some of them like they have great tutorials, and a lot of them have great guides too on segmentation, on different types of promo strategies. So it's one of those things where like you just dip your toe in and you get a little bit better each week. It's just 1% better every single week. If you just do that, that will compound your knowledge and you can start doing really crazy stuff.
Yeah. again, it's one step at a time. Honestly, if you dove into those ad platforms, you'd be up to scuff in like a month. It's the
Yeah.
same thing as it's the overwhelm factor, and you're like, well, I don't have to do anything with this, so you guys deal with it. Hey, cutting in here for just a second. There's one thing that both email copy and long form sales pages have in common. They need to have a single big idea behind them. Now, a few years ago, I gave a talk at the legendary copywriter Clayton Makepeace's last live seminar. And that talk was all about coming up with a big idea. I gave away 8 different techniques for coming up with and strengthening a big idea. Plus, I gave real world before and after examples that have sold millions and millions of dollars worth of products. And people had to pay almost $5,000 to attend that event, but you can get my talk for free right now by going to henrybing.co/Chris. That's henrybing.co/Chris. All right, let's get back to the show. All right, let's talk about, because you went from like, you built up your career and reputation as a copywriter, and then you transitioned to like agency owner and like product, what do you call it, offer owner. So what kind of made you make that leap? Was it like just kind of the logical next step for you? What made you want to do it instead of just, being that highly paid copywriter that, you have a family, a couple kids now, so you could just kick back and cruise on that reputation. What made you want to take that next step into business owner?
Um, I think it's probably a few things. Boredom being one of them, right? It's just the entrepreneurial itch, right? Like you just keep wanting to, just new challenges, right? Like, so part of it was challenging. Part of it was also just like, after a certain while, I felt like I could continue to work with bigger and bigger clients. But if I had my own products, I could sell those and then I could get paid even while I'm not working. So there's more leverage, right? And I'm really big on leverage and like a lot of those investing concepts. So I said, I think that I'd like to explore that. And also, like, I was a teacher. So like, I know how to teach concepts, and, I had a lot of people just organically reaching out. Like I have the sales letter course, Quick Nerdy Sales Letters, which is not going to show you how to write an Agora level piece of copy, or, alternative health publication piece of copy, but like, it's for like people who need to bang out a sales letter fast, right? So I just had things like that where like I had that template internally that I use myself, and like friends would ask me about like how to write certain pieces of copy. I'd be like, just take this template, like just use this. This is going to help you, right? And it solved the problem. You're like, holy shit, I wrote the sales letter really, really fast. So I said, okay, this is helping people. I could just turn this into a product, make some money from doing that. And I like teaching and coaching in general. Like, I was a wrestling coach and I don't have that anymore. And so there is that, like, Gene Schwartz, right? Like, you can't create desire, you can only channel it. Like, that desire still exists within me. So I just applied it now to a different domain. Like, I'm not coaching people on the mat, at least not to my sons are a little bit older, but I still have that itch and desire to like coach people who are in the arena and help them get better. So I'm just indulging that. So that's part of it. And then the other part of it too is like, you get to a certain point, you make 100,000, you make 200,000, you make 300,000, you make 495, then you're like, okay, well, how high is high? How high can we go here? Right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the answer, but I'm going to keep on working. I'm going to keep on pushing, right? Like, I'm going to see how high we could take this thing. And I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know if we're going to, like, I have no idea, but it's kind of fun and exciting to see as it unfolds, what happens and where we can take it.
Yeah, there is no cap on earning potential. As soon as because you can keep adding new services, you can add employees. There's a million ways to scale a business. And I always talk about, the reason that I try to make money. It's because the more money you have in the bank, the more free and secure you are in your own life. Like, you have more options. I know people think about money as like, oh, it's the greedy capitalist or whatever. It's because they want to exploit people or they want power. It's like, no, some people earn money because they want the freedom and flexibility in their own life. But actually, it's one of the things. You were a wrestler, and I didn't get to the level of wrestling you did, but middle school, high school, I was a wrestler, and I really enjoyed it. And I think honestly, it was one of the best things I could have done at that age, because it's freaking hard, and you have to learn to push through pain that, like, most people quit, right? Most people that start wrestling quit before they get to any kind of high school varsity level even. So that training in just sitting there in the suck is super good training for entrepreneurs. But I mean, along that vein, what are some of the biggest challenges you faced that you had to kind of push through launching these? First you went from teacher to freelancer, then you went from freelancer to agency owner, then to product owner. So what are the kind of sticking points that somebody coming up as an email copywriter, like, what do they need to look out for? Where do they need to learn that, like, yeah, it's going to hurt for a little bit, but I can do this?
Well, escaping the bucket of crabs is the first one with leaving the job, because everyone's going to tell you, like, the thing that people told me was like, you always come back and it doesn't work out. I was like,
Yeah.
yo, I ain't never going back. Like, I will make it work. And it's funny because like people talk about like survivorship bias and they say, oh, well, for every Chris Orzechowski, there's 99 other people who had the same idea and like didn't make it. And I'm like, that's fine. But like, I knew I was going to survive. You know, like that's the thing. Like, I knew I was going to win. And I said, I'm going to keep working until I win. And so people, people talk about that, but like the survivorship bias, that person who survives is the person who says they're just not going to stop, right? So that is the first hurdle, mental hurdle that you have to overcome, like escaping the bucket of crabs, getting out of the day job, because it's freaking hard. And like I had, I was engaged. We were looking to buy a house when I got let go from my first teaching job. I had to tuck my tail between my legs and get another teaching job and work for another 2 years while I finally built it. Like I was making money, but I think I made like $7,000 that year. Like I couldn't just leave my job after making $7,000 and like, to my family, to her family, to her, and say, hey, oh yeah, I got this. Like, no, I needed like winning takes care of everything, right? So like I needed cash. I needed cash on the balance sheet. Like, let me show you, we got cash. This is a real thing. This is a business. We have cash flow. We have oxygen, right? So it was making that happen. And then once I made that happen, once I was making just as much money from my side hustle as an email copywriter as I was at the day job, and I was working during my worst 40 hours of the week rather than my best 40 hours. I said, what happens if I flip the ratio? What happens if my email copywriting business becomes my best 40 hours? And that's what I did. So that was the first thing. Jumping from freelancer to agency owner, man, talk about wrestling. The funny thing about like wrestling is like that's always what I used to reframe, because like at the end of the day, like I'm typing words in a box. So like, yeah, this stuff was hard. It was mentally taxing and stressful. Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, like I'm not running stadium stairs at 6 a.m. You know what I mean? Like I'm not getting the crap kicked out of me. Like the UFC fighters, like Frank Yeager, Ricardo Almeida, like Henzo Crazy, like those guys used to come in and roll with us when I was at Rutgers, right?
Wow.
Like I'm not rolling with those dudes. I'm just typing words in a box. You know what I mean? Like I'm not getting the crap kicked out of me right now. So that's always like the reframe. But it definitely was like mentally taxing trying doing the agency, because I didn't have, I never ran an agency. I never launched that before. I was like flying blind. So, what happens is you start taking on fixed cost expenses because you have people, a lot of projects were contractors. So I pay them by project, but some people I needed like fixed costs in my business that I'd never had before. Like when you're a freelancer and you're making 30 grand a month and you have $5,000 to $8,000 a month worth of business expenses, life's great. You got a good life right there. When you're clearing 250, like you're good. Like, I mean, this is pre-inflation numbers, obviously, but so maybe it's like when you're clearing 300 today, but life's good. You got no problems. You just come in, you show up, you write, you're done. Right. But again, like, it's like, I wanted to climb the next mountain and I wanted to see what was at the peak. Right. So, it was taking on those expenses and then saying, oh, okay, you have to make this work. You have a problem. It's a big Rubik's Cube. It's like, okay, you tried to turn the blocks this way. That didn't solve the problem. Turn it back, turn them the other way. Right. And that's what I had to do week after week. I felt like I got punched in the face every single week with the agency. There's a new problem with the client. My contract, I had to keep going back to my contract. We had invoked the kill fee clause. We had to do this clause. We had to do this clause, right? Like I had to keep going back and like, okay, this didn't work out with this client. How do I make it better for this client? What SOP can we put in place? And it was a lot of just every single week, like Monday morning, okay, ready, punch me, like I'm ready for it, right? And then you get hit and then you say, okay, let's solve this problem. Let's create a system here. And eventually by the end of it, after a couple of years of just getting repeatedly punched in the face with problems, you solve most of the big problems, right? And then that was the hard part there. And now we kind of transition, like we still have agency clients. We're not ramping up as much because I just like doing more boutique stuff. Like I thought I was going to have an agency that scales, but then I was like, you know what, for email stuff, like it's just too close to my heart that like, I don't want to scale this to be a big thing where I don't have my fingerprint on it. Like I like being involved with these campaigns. I like being involved with the clients. So it's always going to be small and boutique and I'm okay with that. But then we started to do the products and then we transitioned from having a lot of fixed costs and saying, okay, now you need to replace that with product income. And how do you do that? And how do you have the lead flow coming in, right? Because my conversion, I will say this about myself, if I could brag for a second, I have an exceptional, customer ratio. I have 2,800 customers and 10,000 people on my email list, right? Like really good numbers. I have a lead gen problem. All right. So it's like, okay, well, that's a big problem. How do you get more people in? Do you use social media? Do you use paid ads? Do you use webinars? Do you use JVs? Do you use SEO? Do you use, there's a number of different things. And again, it's a different Rubik's Cube you have to solve. So I always looked at it through that lens. I'm like, I know there's a combination of moves that will unlock, the answer to this problem. I just have to keep turning the blocks until we get, to a victory.
I mean, so my perspective on scaling up, it's kind of like working out, I guess. So nobody gets in the gym if they've never worked out in their life and looks at the barbell and says, I want to be the guy that deadlifts 500 pounds. right? That's just outside of your experience, and it seems stupid at the time. It's like, why do I need that? It's the same thing with business. Is like nobody starts a business saying, oh, I need to get to $5 million in annual revenue, right? You start at like, dude, I just want to get to 100,000 and replace my job. And then it's, oh, I'm at 100. I want to get to 250. And then there's this weird jump where you go from, I'm at 250. It's like, oh, I want to get to a million. That's like the next number in everybody's head for some reason. That's the
That's the
jump.
hardest one right there.
It's the hardest one. And then when you get there, you start looking around. I mean, that's where I got to seven figures in copywriting income, and I was like, what am I doing? And that's when I, started the podcast and the other businesses. Because once you have the muscle, like I know I could always go back and, I don't know, maybe not earn $1 million right off the bat again, but like, I'm not going to starve ever. I have this strength that I built up through that years of working on it. So I always tell people, it's like, what's your goal? Like, don't look at the other person. Like, what's the next goal for you? Build up to that and then reassess. Like, I hate people that make 15-year goals. I don't hate them. I hate the 15-year goals. It doesn't make any sense to me.
No sense.
It's
Yeah.
like, what are you looking at? You have no idea what the world's going to look like in 15 years. So like make a 2-year goal. And then if you're halfway there and you don't like the path you're on, you can change. So like I tell people like, yeah, if you want to start copywriting, sure. Email's a great place to start. You don't have to start thinking you're going to make an agency. Start thinking you're going to make 250, right? Or whatever sounds good to you.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the hardest part for me, especially. Like, it's so hard because, especially as I've been doing more social media now to like see if that's a good avenue for growth, and I think it is. Certainly, Twitter, I've been doing a little more of. Man, you log on and like, who are these people? Like, I thought I knew everyone in the copywriting world, right? Like, because I've been copy chief. I know people in the copywriting club. Like, I know a lot of people. We've hung out before at Copy Chief Live. I know people in these different circles, and then I go on Twitter. And there's all these people, and this person got 134,000 followers. I've never heard of them, right? Yeah. And I'm like, who the hell are these real? Are they bots? Like who are these people? Like it's a big ocean, and there's always someone else that you can compare yourself to, and there's always someone who's going to be doing a little bit better, right? So it's always like I look at it like when you look at it, top investors, right? They always are judged by their internal rate of return. It's not who has the most money; it's who return the best over time. Like you look at guys like Warren Buffett, like, he had that consistent, 25.7%, whatever it was, like internal rate of return year after year after year after, he just kept that up consistently. So like, that's the thing with your business. Like maybe you're only at $60,000, but like, if you can just get 10% every single quarter, your business is going to start doubling and doubling and doubling and doubling after a few years. And like, it doesn't matter if you're at 60,000 right now and someone else is at 120, because maybe they're stuck at 120 3 years from now. That's what happened with me. There were a lot of dudes back in the day. And I was like, man, these people are so far ahead of me. I don't know if I'm ever going to catch them, right? Because they had 5 years. They started 5 years earlier than me. It's back in like 2016, 2017. I would see all these names, all these people. But man, these people are so far ahead of me. I passed all of them. I passed so many of these people because I just focused on my internal rate of return with the shit that I was doing. I said, I'm going to keep compounding my leverage. I'm going to keep compounding my email list, the content that I create. I have more content than anyone now. I have articles, I have podcasts, I have all this stuff, because I just kept doing one a week, and that's all I focused on. I said, I can't jump over them, but on a long enough timeline, I could hockey stick and they could stay linear.
So talking about metrics like that, what are a lot of people, when I write a sales letter, the metric is sales, right? Sales minus refunds, because sometimes you overpromise and then you got to learn to scale back and, not say you're going to make 1,000,000% return, which is what some joker copywriters try to put out there. Just make a bigger promise. But with email, like your measurement isn't always sales. At the end of the day, it's company growth, right? But what are the kind of vanity metrics that people worry about versus what really matters in like high performing email?
So, the big ones that people talk about, like opens, clicks, sales, those are 3 of the main metrics. I lump replies in there too. Again, if you're dealing with an e-commerce brand with 600,000 people, like we don't look at the replies, because every email they send is going to get replies because of customer service but I'm talking about like smaller lists, like businesses like, yours and mine. Like sometimes you send an email and you like get 40 replies. It lights people up. You're like, okay, that hit a nerve, whatever that was. Opens, people are really concerned. A lot of brand owners are concerned with their open rates. And the thing is, like, it's not the most important thing, but all these metrics are important because you want to see engagement, like, just because again, context dependent, because sometimes there's a promo, sometimes there's a launch, sometimes there's a deadline associated. And like those campaigns, we like to look at historical data, right? Like if we do a launch this year, how does it compare with the launch last year? And if we factor in list growth year over year, right? Did we crush it? Did we do about the same? Did we do less? That's how we know through historical data. From like a per email standpoint, it's always tough to tell. What I like to do, my North Star metric for just assessing everything, because there's so many different factors, and I hate to give like it depends type answers, but the general health of a list, I always look at earnings per subscriber, right? How much money do you earn per subscriber on a monthly and a yearly basis, right? And there's that metric of $1 per subscriber per month. It's like the metric. If that was my performance, I'd have to fire everyone on my team, including myself. I wouldn't be able to pay my salary, right? So like, if that's all we did, if we went by the industry standard metric of $1 per subscriber per month, like I wouldn't have a business, right? Or I'd have a very small business. So I think part of it is just looking at, we talk about like internal rate of return, competing against yourself. Like if you can continue to gradually push that EPS a little bit higher and higher, what that's going to cause you to do is going to cause you to mail to more engaged people, to segment better and run better segmented campaigns, to get better with the copy, to increase your opens and clicks and those kind of things over time, your conversion, your on-page conversion, those type of things. But over time, that metric should track up EPS, I think, if you're doing a good job.
I mean, hopefully, right? Making more per subscriber.
Ideally, yeah.
I mean, it's one of the harder metrics to nail down in a business, especially if you have multiple sources of traffic coming into your list. Is segmenting is like, all right, I put out these Facebook ads. What's this customer worth versus what's an organic customer worth versus what's a Twitter follower worth, right? Have you even tried to like measure Twitter follower ROI or things like that?
Well, what we do is we tag based on sign up source, and this is actually something I recommend everyone do if you have your own list. And we're not perfect; we're getting better because as we've added more complexity, more lead gen sources. What we basically just do is at different pages, and like if I promote something on Twitter, again, the problem is like you don't always know the path someone takes. Someone sees a tweet that you have, and they go Google your name, and they land on your YouTube channel, and they look at your sales page, and then they get retargeted on Facebook, and that's how they get on your list, right? So like, who gets the win, right? It's hard to tell unless you use like a Whooper or something crazy with $1,000 a month software, which we don't need to do. But I like to try to segment as much as I can sign up source. And so I know, like, I look at buyers like, oh, people who came from Sparkloop referrals, that's a segment of buyers. People who came from Facebook ads, that's a segment of buyers. So I've actually done some analytics. I've worked with Ross O'Loughlin, and we've done Facebook ad analytics and saw the rate of return for the money we spent on Facebook ads. And I want to like punch myself in the face because we got a 6.4x return over 18 months. And I ended up turning those ads off after a while because I was like, I don't know if these are working as good as I want them to. Stupid. But, obviously, like the more developed as you get as a business, the bigger your business grows, the more revenue you have, that stuff becomes more and more important because, I don't know if you ever truly get to, like, I don't know if there's any businesses out there, even like Fortune 500 who like know it down to $1. Like, I think you got a pretty good idea, but I think that what's that cliche in advertising? Like, 50% of our advertising works. We just don't know what 50% it is.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe not 50%. Maybe some businesses get it to like 80 or 90%, but I don't think anyone truly knows 100%. I just don't know if you can at this stage of, technology and cookies and those kind of things.
So when I worked with Natural Health Sherpa, they were doing regression analysis and all these really high end things to get their, day 0, day 1, day 7, day 30, day 60, day 90, like return on customers because they're spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars a year on ad spends. But at the end of the day, they have organic signups too. There's just this bucket of 20 to 30% that you're like, hopefully that one makes money.
Always. Yeah. And like, I think at the end of the day, what I've learned from having a business and having people on my team and like working with a fractional CFO and like doing all these things is like, at the end of the day, like the business is a big algorithm, it's a big machine, but like, you just go quarter by quarter, or actually I just go day by day. Like I just wake up, it's okay, let's make some money today. Like let's look at where we at for the month, where are we at for the quarter, where are we at for the year, what are we looking at year over year, and like, can we just increase it? Can we continue to have that margin? And just taking it from that angle. And again, like, I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but that's what I've been doing because I think, everyone wants to get everything perfect, but what I've learned looking under the hood of a lot of businesses and my own business is like, you're never going to have it all figured out. A lot of shit's going to be held together with duct tape, and that's just okay. Even like, I'm sure companies like Apple, they got stuff held together by duct tape. And it's just like, okay, you have enough people to solve the problems and live to fight another day and live to be more profitable. And that's always the way that I've looked at it.
Yeah, I was hanging out with Abby Woodcock, who's a mutual friend of ours, last week at the Kevin Rogers event mastermind thing. And she reminded me of this Neil Gaiman quote. It was in his arts commencement address that he gave to Philadelphia University of the Arts. And he was talking about you're like how to have a successful freelance career, because that's what most artists are. And he's like, you see the mountain in the distance, and you do something, and you look up and you see, did it get me closer to the mountain or not? And that's all you can do really at the end of the day. Is you can make all these plans for your 90-day RO, like return on ad spend and all that, but at the end of the day, you just look up, did you get closer to your goal? Did you make more money today than you did yesterday? And that's progress. That's all you can do. It's one step at a time, no matter what.
Yeah, and like what I always tell myself, and it's kind of funny, like I'll tell myself, like, okay, you look at the profits for the quarter, those kind of things. I take, then what's your take home? And then how much of the take home can you invest? And then what's the return on those investments? And then how long of a timeline do I have? What's the compounding going to be? And I always like extrapolate those things in my head. And then I'm like, okay, and then by this year, I'm gonna have this much in this year, and then I'm gonna die. And that's what's gonna happen to all of us. We're all gonna die. So like there's the pursuit of the thing, and then there's the thing itself. And I always find a lot of enjoyment in the pursuit. And like, this is the most fun I've ever been having. Like, yes, it's stressful, and yes, it's like pushing myself out of my comfort zone, and like I don't know what the hell I'm doing half the time, and everything is very much held together by duct tape, no matter how it looks from the outside. But it's also like, I think most people, like, you look back and you're like, that was, even if it was stressful, and like, I would say pulling my hair up, but we're past that
I'm there
point.
with you, man.
But like, it's the most fun you ever have, so like, yes, in the moment you're worried, you're anxious, you're scared, but like it's all going to work out. Like, the thing is, like, you're probably not going to starve to death in the modern world. You know what I mean? Like, I always tell myself, you could literally go eat trash out of the dumpster. Like, you're not going to die. You know what I mean? Like, I don't ever want to have to do that. Don't get me wrong. But like, you're going to live to fight another day, no matter what happens. Like, the sea people aren't coming in 1177 BC, and they're not going to ransack your village and raise the thing to the ground. Like, that's not going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, the world that we live in, like, you're going to live to fight another day. There's always another fight that you could win.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is why I don't get people that work in jobs they hate forever, doing things they don't like, building a life that they don't actually want to be a part of. Is like, look, man, life is an adventure, and you only get one of them. So you might as well make the most of it. And again, most likely, unless, there's some catastrophic climate, like meteor from the sky, like, you're not going to die. You're not going to starve to death. Life is going to be okay. And you can always start over. But I wonder, do you think about, like, you have two kids now. Do you think about legacy when you're building your business? Like, how do you picture kind of, because I know I said I don't make like long-term plans, but I do kind of think about legacy. It's like, when I'm done with this business or this career, what would I have wanted to achieve? Does that ever cross your mind?
Yeah. And it's hard because I struggle with the intangibility of online business sometimes, right? Because like, my kids see me, my son Blake, he's 2.5 now. Like, he just sees me on the computer, like, just type it on the computer. I can't take him to a store. I can't take him to an office. So like, I mean, maybe I can get an office building at some point, right? But like, still, it's like, it's this intangibility that kind of gives me a little bit of anxiety, right? When I think about that stuff. But at the same time, like, there's lots of different ways to have legacy books, or ways to have legacy. And I'm writing another book, my third book right now. And like, I'm going to continue to write books throughout my career, and like, have those tangible assets that can be handed down, excuse me. But like, also, like, I always think like it would be cool to make enough money to set my bloodline up and become an old money institution one day, like, I don't know, like, very Gatsby-esque, right? But like, there's something about that that seems like another cool challenge, another cool mountain that I want to climb. And like, not necessarily saying I don't want to be a billionaire. Like, if my kids take it and run with it and whatever, and by then inflation's gonna, everyone's gonna be a billionaire, right? At some point. I'm really curious to see what happens in like 50%, 50 years from now, and 50% of the people are billionaires, but whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wanted to set my family up with like that. Like, I asked my dad, I said, what, before our, his family came, I think his grandparents came over. They lived in Brooklyn, the Polish section. But before that, they were in Poland, right? And I said, well, what did they do? So they were farmers, probably potato farmers, wheat farmers, something, right? So I'm like, how cool would it be if like they were potato farmers, let's just say, right? And then I create a dynasty, and then everyone else supports the dynasty. And like, this is big shit thinking, right? People probably listen to this like, who the hell are you? Even me, I'm like, who the hell am I to think that? But at the same time, like, you're going to live once. Why not try? Right? Maybe we could accumulate enough assets. Maybe we can make that happen, right? Or even just some small legacy type situation. Like, I don't know, like, I'm 33 years old. I got my whole life ahead of me. Like, I don't know where we're going to go. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, who the hell knows, right? But like I start to think about like what could I create? And that's always the challenge for me is more exciting than actually getting to the thing, because by the time I actually get what I want, you're gonna die, right? Like you're gonna be, it's cool to have Warren Buffett money, but I don't want to be 91. You know what I mean? So, but I bet he
Yeah.
enjoyed the journey. I bet he'd trade and go back and start the journey again if he could.
It's true. It's always that age old, do you want money or youth? And you always
Mm-hmm.
choose youth because it's opportunity. Everybody wants opportunity. It's actually the legacy I'm trying to build is I want to help more people become free and financially secure and actually be able to, I don't think this American experiment can go on for another 200 years. I don't know if it can go on for another 20 years the way we're going right now. So I want to help people get secure. And like, look, if I can build a community of, let's say I helped 100 people find financial security where they could build their own thing and build communities around them in the event that like society falls apart and the American empire splits apart, like that would be a legacy for me. That's 100 people that changed thousands of lives each, right? So that's kind of the legacy that I'm building towards right now. And you talk about your ancestors. My ancestors were pirates on the Rhine River that had to run away so they didn't get hung. And they landed in Pennsylvania, and here we all still are. So I'm not trying to go
Yeah,
back to the pirates, and I don't know if having pirates as ancestors is an honorable legacy or lineage or not, but
I think it's badass.
but we are where we are. So I want to get a little bit tactical. I've been
Mm-hmm.
going through your email copy academy course that you partnered in some way with Kevin Rogers to launch it. So it's selling through Copy Chief right now. What I like about it is that it's not just tactical and it's not just philosophy. You kind of it kind of goes back and forth between the two. So what were your goals, I guess, when you were launching that, and how did you kind of think about putting it together when you did?
The big thing I wanted to do was kind of document my systems that I have. Like most of my courses are just me documenting the systems that I've created for myself in my own business to get certain outcomes, right? So, you know, I was doing project after project as an email copywriter, and I said, I know this goes back to Abby Woodcock, right? Because she always says, like, you might not know there's a system, but there is, whether you realize it or not. And I said, there's definitely a system to how I do all these things on a project, how I research, how I kick it off, how I write broadcasts, how I think about autoresponders, how I think about launch sequences, how I get clients, how I close them. So I said, what if I just put this into a system, because I kind of do the same thing every time. And I bet other people could just, who don't have systems, could just use the system and get similar type outcomes. So that's what I was thinking. I tried to document as much as possible, and not just document the system, but also show examples of like, okay, here's the steps that you take. And this goes back to when I was a teacher, right? It's like you introduce the concept, you break down the formula, and then you show examples of the formula being played out, right? So like that's what I tried to do. I tried to give you the philosophical in terms of here's why we do this and how we think about this, and here's the framework behind it, and then here's actual examples and like different considerations as you're going out in the trenches and doing this yourself. Um, and I like doing that because it forces me to really dial my stuff in. Because if you could teach it to someone else, it like forces you to say, okay, you have to give this to someone, and they have to do it without you holding their hand. Right.
Right.
So that's how you get really good. And that's why I think I got better as a copywriter once I started teaching this stuff, because I said, okay, what is the framework? What is going on? What is going on in my head? Like, how do I give this to someone else? And can they do the same thing? Especially as an agency owner, like, how do I hand this off? We have 12 clients at a time. I can't write for all 12, right? Like, how do I give this to my team of 6 writers and Angie, my copy chief? And how do we get these projects done? So that was what I tried to do.
Yeah, I think it's well done. Like I said, and it does have the tactical stuff. It's like you go through the ESPs, the email service providers. You kind of show how to do the tagging. Well, I just like the balance of walking people through it. So what kind of, I mean, because if you wanted to, you could buy that course and go through it, and I don't know, probably take 2 or 3 days to sit through all the videos. But what kind of pace do you recommend people go through it and like work through exercises and stuff?
I think like one a week is probably a good rhythm. And because I want you to take some time and digest it, right? It's like you go through, do the exercise, let it sit for a little bit. Like for me, like I'm very big on like letting things marinate, right? Like even when I'm working on a project, I just wrapped up a sales letter project for a client in the testosterone optimization space. And I wrote it. It probably only took me about 2 days to write, but the project took me about a month. And the reason why is because as I'm doing research, I'm thinking, I'm stopping,
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I'm closing the computer, I'm going on a walk, right? Or playing with my kids, and letting those ideas marinate in my subconscious and like work things over mentally so that I could think of the best way to structure the argument and the best headlines and those kind of things. So I think the same thing is true when you're going through the information. Like, yeah, it's cool to like speed run through the course, but at the end of the day, like if you don't retain a lot of the stuff and you don't internalize it, it's not going to really do good for you. So if you do a module, do the homework, let it sit for a few days, start the next one, that's when I think it has time to kind of sink in. I always like to joke I have a thick skull. It takes a lot to sink in. So I like letting it kind of sink into my brain and just marinate in there.
Yeah, the way I like to go through courses, especially like that, is I like to sit through. I don't do the exercise the first time. I just watch all the videos through, and you kind of it seeds ideas in your mind, and then I go back and do the course as it was intended. And I feel like it's the intermittent reinforcement, right? It's so you learned, you got all the information entered your head, whether you absorbed it fully or recognize it or can recall it or not. It all got in your head, and then you go back and you kind of know where it's going, and then you understand each individual piece better. I don't know if you've ever done a course like that, but that's always been, if I really wanted to learn something in early days in the copywriting course, that's what I did with John Carlton's thing. As I went, Kick-Ass Copywriting Secrets was my Bible for a couple of years when I was first starting out. And I just blew through that thing and I listened to it on audiobook. And then I went through and did it chapter by chapter. So I feel like if you're going to take something like this and you seriously want to get good at email, that intermittent reinforcement and that spaced learning is a good way to do it.
Well, one thing about Carlton's course, I took Simple Writing System with him back in 2017, 2018, whatever it was. And I was amazed. It's funny you talk about like going through it and then going through and doing the assignments. How many people just don't even do the assignments? How many people just don't even do that? I was like, it was $5,000 to get feedback from Carlton. And I did it. I did every assignment. And I actually did it for a project that I didn't even need the sales letter for. I just wanted to go through the process and learn from him, right? But there were people, it's a 9-week thing. There are people on week 8 who are just starting to, oh yeah, I got to get, module number 1 in. Oh, I hope I can finish. Oh, I didn't finish. I'm like, it's John Carlton. You will never have this opportunity again. Like, how do you not do the work? But there's always people just don't, I don't know what it is. They just won't do the work. So if you just do the work, any work, you're going to be ahead of 90% of people. That's what I think.
I mean, there's 80-20 in everything, right? So only 20% of people would even consider buying a Carlton course or your course or any of my stuff. And then only 20% of those are going to actually go through it and do it the way it's intended. And it's like, I've given up trying to force people to do it. I want them to always have the opportunity to get the most out of it. But like, dude, if you don't want to do it, I'll take your money if you wanted to spend it. And you can always come back if it just wasn't the right time for you, maybe, whatever. But like, I don't know. I'm an action taker, right? I'm a very ready, fire, aim person. But like, if I'm buying something and I'm committing to it, I want to learn this thing. And as long as I'm getting something out of it, I'm doing it.
Yeah. Cream always rises to the top. That's what I say.
So let's talk about your books, because you said you're working on your 3rd book right now. So what are the first 2?
First one is Make It Rain, which is kind of a good primer on email marketing, just my general email marketing philosophy and some strategy. The second one is Scale While You Sleep, which is specifically about e-commerce email automation and the core sequences you need to scale in an automated way. The third one is called Client Acquisition. And I'm writing this book because I have so many people on my list who they just don't know how to get clients. And it just kills me when I see, people have different opinions on cold email, but like when a copywriter reaches out to me and they're like exasperated and they're like, I've been sending hundreds of cold emails, like nothing's been working. Like the first thing we got to do when we're in the hole is we got to stop digging, number one, and then we got to climb out, and then we got to start climbing the mountain, right? So I'm like, if I could just solve the acquisition problem, because for me, like I think one thing I do better than anyone else is understanding the art and science of client acquisition. I will go toe to toe in a bake off versus anyone I think I'm going to win. That's just the confidence I have in myself, my processes that I've honed in over the years. And maybe people, oh, you're bragging. Well, okay, maybe I am, but I think I'm very good at this. So I'm going to say that I'm very good at this, and I'm going to create the system, or I have the system. I'm going to document the system for how to get clients consistently, repeatedly, predictably, no matter where you're at in your journey. Because the stuff that I'm doing today is the stuff that I've been doing for years, and it's never going to change because, it's like the principles of the principles, right? So I get big clients. I get a lot of them. I turn away clients. I connect writers with clients all the time. I have more work than I could ever even handle if I wanted to. Why is that? Because I did things differently. So that's what I want to cover in this book, because there's so many people who they think being a copywriter is sending all these cold emails and they burn themselves out. And I'm like, cold email has a time and a place, right? Like I could cold email, you could cold email, like we'll get a response because of who we are and what we've done, right? But when you're new, that's not the way to go about it. So I want this book to be the book that solves that problem for everyone. Like once you know how to get clients, you never need to solve that problem again. and then you can get on with your career. So that's what I'm hoping for my people, the 10,000 people on my list. I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to solve this problem for you. You're never going to have to worry about this again. And then you can get on with building your career and like getting the life that you want.
Yeah, I like it. You're creating the so my system, like what I tell people is like you got to get good, get clients, get paid, and you do it in that order, and then cycle back through. And so I like that you got good, right? Your first two books are here's how to do it, then to get clients, and I'm sure your next one's going to be like, all right, here's how we're doing rev share, and here's how we're ramping up that income. So I like that system. Where can people go to get those the first couple books, and then is there a wait list, I guess, for your new one?
Yeah, the new book should be out hopefully November 1st, I think. I think that's the date that we're shooting for. You can get a free copy of Make It Rain at theemailcopywriter.com. And then Scale While You Sleep, you'll get an email, and then there will be a link for Scale While You Sleep. It's like $5. I give you a copy of my newsletter as well, a video training or 2 video trainings. I give you a whole bunch of bonuses. $5 is not a bad deal. You can buy it on Amazon too if you want, but you don't get the bonuses. So, and then Make It Rain, you could also buy on Amazon, but you just grab it for free digitally on my website. It's probably a better deal for most people. So yeah, theemailcopywriter.com.
Yeah. So you were talking about being cocky, and you know what? Like it really depends on your intention behind it, right? If you're out there saying, I'm the best copywriter, I'm the best email guy, I'm the best at getting clients, and you can never do it, then that's BS, right? That person's a jerk. You're doing it because you're like, look, I've done this. I'm going to show you how to do it. I want to help you. So the intention behind it is what really matters. And I think that's what you're doing. So we have a guest here to help us sign off. Chris, it's been.
There's my son, Blake. Say hi, Blake.
What's up, Blake?
Okay, he's a little tired, I think.
All right, man. This has been a lot of fun. We've been going for about an hour. So I'm going to let you go. Theemailcopywriter.com. Anything else, anywhere else you want to send people to? Your Twitter, social media, any of that?
Yeah, Twitter handle is at Chris Orze. Come give me a follow there. I'd like to have some fun and make some jokes and post some memes and stuff. But anyone who's listening to this, like, if you guys have questions on email, feel free to reach out. Like, I just want to help people kick ass. Like, I know how much this has changed my life, and I think it's an awesome career path, and I think it's an awesome way to everything you said about like getting that independence, getting that freedom, and getting the money you need to live the life that you want to set yourself up. I think it's a good way to go. So just kick some ass and refuse to lose and make it happen.
All right. With that, we're signing off. See you, everybody. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
All right. That's our episode for the week. If you're at all interested in email copywriting for your business or as a career, I highly recommend Chris's Email Copy Academy. He's the best email teacher out there. And, I've been writing emails as part of my career for over a decade, and I still got a ton out of his course. So if you want to check that out, you can go to orzyemail.com to get all the details. That's ORZY email.com. All right. I'll see you back here next week.